out.
Oh, well, thank you very much. So are we actually going live now, or are we still waiting?
Yeah, if you kick it off, I'll sort out this slide deck.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. And once again, we're here again for I would say usually monthly meeting, but it's now seems like it's probably every 2 to 3 weeks. And every time we come together, there's always a raft of changes or sort of concerns or issues that we sort of look at. This is no different. As I've mentioned and sent out, Peter sent out on the emails, and I've sent out in the WhatsApp group, you know, the most important thing here is really coming together to discuss topical issues and really look at some good practices and some solutions which are out there and which has really been sort of like provided by some of the people you'll see in the group. It doesn't mean sometimes we always do get some great speakers in, but we also look at some people who are part and parcel of the sort of community to sort of like show what they've done. And in the resilience during this time, we've all had to sort of put and provide sort of situations or solutions for our own all our concerns that we have. And I think it's really good to hear from one another in regards to that. But definitely, we also have people like CITATION and MICK should be there today, speaking about things such as everyday things, such as supervision. And I think a key thing that I think everyone can relate to is everyone's mental health and well-being at present. And we can now use the supervisions to sort of help us gauge how our fellow colleagues are feeling. And you can do it officially or unofficially, but with the supervision, it gives you a structure in which to bring someone forward. So I think these are sort of things that we can do. So I think it's really key to really look into that, and it does improve really all sort of the mindset within a workplace or environment. And I think it's really important.
And I think, actually, just to interrupt, I mean, very, very key point that Dudley just mentioned, everyday things. And what we're hearing, what's perhaps pertinent to CQC, is that people are doing a great job fighting the COVID battle, but they're actually sometimes forgetting or not perhaps remembering to keep all the everyday things up to date and to do those everyday things. So when you look at some organizations, they're doing a really good job, but they're missing out on some of the very basic items because they're too busy. And that's a key management function, is to make sure that somebody is doing those basic tasks. Even if you have to do them yourself, don't rely on other people to actually pick up and do things. It's back to making sure that those folks are actually doing them. Just to also say that we are recording the meeting, just so to let you know. We do that so that we can check on the notes later. If you have cameras, please use them. And if there are any subjects you want us to cover in future meetings, then, you know, again, let Dudley or myself know, and we'll see what we can do to sort it out. Dudley, sorry, I interrupted.
No, you can continue. I'm just going to type a message just to welcome everyone in the box. And if everyone wants to share or mention anything, they always use that as a platform to speak. Not everyone is as confident as you, Peter. So some people just maybe like to send a message in the chat box, and some people can take and look at the messages, and they might be able to answer a query. I know there are so many sort of things that people have, and everyone's needs seems different, but they're all as important as each other. And I think everything from funding, regulations, regulators, risk assessments, PPE, testing, money coming in.
Let's not get onto testing.
We could go on for a very long time.
Let's just not do testing. Okay. On that happy note, to move well away from testing, Leslie, can you talk to us about, in that sense, your experience of and dealing with and how to manage long COVID, please?
Okay, so I have personal experience with this because my sister did have COVID back in April, and I did have a phone call from the hospital saying, you know, at 12:30 at night, your sister's here, you know, you need to have a conversation with her, make it worth everlasting, because they didn't know whether she would actually survive. So she was in a coma for 33 days. While she was in a coma, she had various times where her kidneys failed. So she had kidney dialysis 3 to 4 times. She had a tracheostomy being done to her. She had various worries about her kidneys, various worries about was she going to survive. So they actually done proning, which is putting you on your front. So a lot of the time she was on her front to relieve her lungs so that she could breathe more easily. Because she's slightly overweight, that also didn't help with her breathing, so that's why they put her on her front, which is called proning. So she was on her front for about 20 days. As they gradually brought her out of her coma, there was lots of disorientation while she was on the ward. She thought she was in America. She was telling everyone that she wanted to go to Walmart. She kept trying to pay everyone for everything. She was singing. And if you know my sister, she doesn't sing. So it was like a totally different character that was coming around. So they kept her in the ward for about 2 weeks, which she was out of the coma. Then they transferred her to the normal ward. Now, on the normal ward, she was there for a week. I don't think the nursing staff understands the complications of someone coming out of a coma suffering from COVID, because she had all the signs and symptoms of long COVID, but we didn't actually know about that then. We didn't know that that exists. So she then came home with a care package. She had the lovely council carers who done an amazing job, 4 calls a day. She could only stand step transfer. Now, my sister's only 55, so it's not as if she's elderly. So she had to learn to walk again. She had to learn to talk again. When she came home, her mobility was minimal. It was literally stand step transfer. To be honest, when she first come home, I don't think everyone realised that she was still very much medicated. She had a look about her that she was lost. So it took a couple of weeks of her being at home, building up her stand step transfers, trying to get her sleep back on point because she wasn't sleeping. She suffers now. This week, she suffered from crackling of a left lung that they rushed her to hospital because the doctor did think she had COVID because she had slight temperature again, which on Monday she went to St Helier Hospital and she was in the COVID ward of St Helier, to which they discharged her quite quickly. But this has really mentally traumatised her, going on a COVID ward. As you can imagine, if you've nearly lost your life and been 33 days in a coma, to then be put on a COVID ward with people, it was very terrifying for her. So if I go over and just tell you what symptoms she has, and this has been going on since she's come home. So she's having lasting breathing problems. When she's talking, she has to sometimes wait, take a breath, and then carry on talking. She has poor feeling in her fingertips and her toes. She gets the chills at times. She's disorientated. Luckily, she's not hallucinating. There was a lot of hallucinations when she first come home, but she's not hallucinating at the moment. The most thing I think that's really affecting her is her muscle and body ache, because they were proning her and they were saying when they prone people, it's like someone swimming. So one day you'll be like that, one day you'll be like that. So all the muscle shoulders are not like ours, they're sort of round. So they haven't been used. So she has sometimes little flutters in her heart, so there's something going on with her heart. She is fatigued. She is fatigued walking up a flight of stairs. She's fatigued going from a short distance upstairs to the bathroom. She can't do anything. She can't go anywhere because she's so fatigued. She has little bouts now and then of feeling sick and diarrhea. The saddest thing I feel is after 100 days of her being home in the coma, she lost her hair. She has got hardly any hair at the moment, and that's something that COVID, long COVID, people suffering from long COVID don't actually know until it starts happening. We had a lovely, oh, and obviously there is some memory loss, there's brain fog. She's developed a stutter, and this stutter really aggravates her because she knows she's doing it, but she can't control it. So at the moment, she's trying her best. She goes to a physio, but it's a meet and greet of long COVID people who were both in St Helier at the time, and they're trying rehabilitation with her, but it's in Leatherhead. So even the journey there, she's getting picked up by transport, just the journey there, getting off the van and going, and you know, that collects them and going into there. She's fatigued as soon as she gets there, and they're trying to get her to do physio, to get her to work her muscles, to get her back to normal, but she feels exhausted just from the journey. I did go with her, and it was very, very nice, and that's how they've been starting to do their looking into the effects of people who have been on ICU and been on the machines for quite a long time, because they're not used to this happening. Normally, you know, you only spend like a week or two on the machines. They, you know, 33 days on a breathing machine is not heard of. You know, there's normally, it ends in being terminal. So they're not used to this. So we spoke to her about how she felt when she was in a coma. And if I can share that with you, because I thought my sister had really bad sleep. And when they told me that they were putting her in a coma, I said to her on that evening call, at least you're going to have a lovely sleep, because she's terrible at sleeping. And what I didn't realise was the drugs that they give them to keep them asleep, actually, they've got hallucinations. So they will be, you think they're sleeping, but they are in their mind wide awake, having these lucid hallucinations that aren't nice, I'll just say. And this was a group of 6 people that had been before us, and they all had the same dreams, which wasn't very nice. So they're hoping to do a little help group for her to meet and greet people who have been in the same position, because I can share things with her, but I can't share the same experiences because I didn't experience it. They will take her to the ward and take her to ICU to see her bed. They showed her on a iPad her bed where she was, and as she was seeing the staff, they were all pulling their masks down, going, "Hello, Sharon, do you remember me?" And obviously, as time went on, you could see the recognition. She started recognising people, because when you're in ICU, you're having one-to-one care. So she met the nurses that were looking after her, and it was a really lovely but quite emotional meeting. They've put things in place for her to help her, but I do believe there's not enough. I do believe she was left too long at home for 8 weeks without having any psychological support, emotional support. You know, she's a foster parent for her granddaughter, so there's a lot to consider. And I do believe that there needs to be help for other people out there that are not affected by COVID, but they've had a family member that has, because it's the rippling effect. You know, it ripples out and ripples out and ripples out. So that's my little bit of feedback about my sister, and I do believe she was more able when she first come out. As time's going on, her long COVID symptoms are getting much worse. She is in pain daily. She even sitting up in bed hurts. So she's got an awful lot of work to do. But I do believe that there needs to be a wider support group, because even though we were sitting there and it was affecting her, there was nothing in place for me. And to be honest, I had a phone call from someone from the hospital asking, because I'd been on the phone to them quite a lot when she was in there, you know, how are you in all this? And I didn't actually realise till they started speaking to me how I'd been affected by it, and it had brought it to light. So then I had to take a week off just for myself, without going to hospitals, without arranging things and running around, just to get myself on an even keel, to come back and to look after my clients and my caregivers, and to keep us all safe from COVID. So that's just my story with my experience with my sister. So I just wanted to share it with you, to let you know, if there's anyone out there who needs support, who wants to talk to someone who's been in that same situation, I'm here and I can hopefully help you in some way.
Leslie, thank you. That's very thought-provoking and very good of you to share something very personal. What I'm sort of hearing overall is that there are quite a lot of cases of a similar, ilk coming along, and as Leslie has said, there's not only the issue with the person who has had the COVID, but also the stress, the support issues around friends and family. And as yet, there seems to be no protocol. So I suspect that what's going to happen is that I'm picking this up nationally. So there may well be some sort of group put together of experienced experts who can support. But as care providers, it could well be that you are going to get referrals along these lines, and that you need to have your balls in a row, so that you know who to talk to and how to deal with it, because there's going to be things that haven't been experienced before.
Yes, and when my sister went down to the ward, even in the medical professionals, because she went down to a ward that wasn't COVID related, that was just, let's say, a normal ward, I don't think the staff there understood, because they're going to her, come on, stand up, come on, you can do it, come, because physically looking at her, you'd think she's only young, you've not lost your legs, you can stand up, you can walk, why aren't you doing it? And they were quite mean to her, I feel, without knowing how she was feeling, because we didn't understand it back then. That's why we need to provoke the awareness of this for everyone to know.
Yeah.
I mean, I totally agree. And I think there is a lot of people who definitely went through COVID and came out the other end of really not, they've been seen as cases of people say you get well, you survived it, rather than, really taking them out there to say this is what can happen to you, especially if you aren't covering up or protecting yourself or trying to spread it. But I think there's too much that goes on now in regards to, they're an afterthought. And I think the real stories, such as what you said, Leslie, about your sister, a lot of people don't understand, and the symptoms, especially long COVID, I have some understanding as well, from losing hair and so forth. It's something which really, and the people don't understand that they come one after the other, and things from frozen shoulders and all things that develop with it are really things that we should be concerned about. And as Peter mentioned, you may end up with a patient at some point, or a client who you're managing, who has these symptoms, and just being aware of this is really important, and to share that is really a key factor.
Yes, without doubt. I didn't say this in the beginning, but I will share this with you now because I feel more confident, if that's okay. Within a week of my sister going into hospital and having a phone call from the hospital, I had my mum, who was in St Helier, who'd had a slight stroke. They'd moved her from St Helier to Epsom Hospital because St Helier was a dirty ward. It was COVID. My mum was COVID free, but when she got to Epsom and Newell, she was only, I had the phone call from my sister on Thursday. On the Monday, I got a phone call from the hospital that my mum had contracted COVID in the hospital and she was seriously ill. And sadly, she did pass away from COVID. So I was able to go and visit her when she was on end of life. I did use my PPE from my company. I took it with me. I did tell the staff, nursing staff, because I'd been speaking to them obviously for quite a while. They got to know me quite well, both hospitals. And I did speak to the specialist, and he asked me to go up to hospital and meet and greet him, and he allowed me to see my mum. So I was permitted with the PPE that I use from our company to go and visit my mum when she was on her last days. So when I came back to work, I used that as a positive to my care team to show them I was able to visit my mum. I was able to touch my mum. I was with her for quite a long time, followed all the protocol that we follow, everything to a T, and I was living proof that if you follow the guidelines that we set you, you're safe. And that's you know, I'd done my wellbeing checks with all my care staff, letting them know that my mum passed away, but you know, I was when I was stronger, not straight away, obviously, you know, and using our PPE made me safe. So I wouldn't put anybody in a position where they're going to be unsafe. I wouldn't ask anyone to look after anyone who, you know, they thought that they would get COVID. So I was living proof that it actually works what we're doing. It's not just us saying this. I've actually been there. So, you know, I just thought I'd, you know, share that with you so that you can tell your staff that following all the guidelines we set, you know, infection control, making sure that we change our gloves, making sure that we're using the appropriate PPE for the individual, and washing our hands is going to keep us safe. So I just wanted to let you know about that, because I know people think even if they've got their PPE on, they're still worried they're going to catch it. And I am living proof that you know, it doesn't mean to say you are going to catch it. If we're all keeping ourselves safe, being very vigilant about what we're doing and adhering to the guidelines that we set you, we can provide care to people in a safe manner.
I think that's really great, Leslie. I think also another thing that I'd like to say, it shows that good care doesn't have to be compromised just because someone may have COVID-19.
No.
I think that's a key factor that that people forget, and staff should be told that, you know, good care shouldn't be compromised because someone may have either COVID or any other sort of long-term sort of infection or disease.
We've had only one case where a lady, one of our clients, had COVID. She went into hospital. While she was in hospital, she was contagious. When she came home, we helped her with end of life, and we was able to manage her last wishes, which she wanted to pass away in our own home with her husband in the same room, and we were able to do that in a safe way. And all of my care staff are 100% COVID free. So just to let you know, if anyone's worried about that, because long COVID has some of the same symptoms as COVID. So, you know, carers might start being scaremongering each other that they might catch it, they might do this. So it's just to put it out there. A lot of the systems are the same, you know, but it doesn't mean to say that you're going to catch it. Follow our guidelines strictly and you will keep yourself safe.
Yeah, I think some very wise words there. And I think the fact that you've taken time off and thought about yourself and thought about staff as well. And at a meeting yesterday, there was quite a lot of discussion about grief, allowing
Yeah.
people time for grief. And, we are seeing social care providers who do grief training. They use, say, a local cruise counsellor to come in, something like that. And, you can't stress the benefits of things like employee assistance schemes, like benefit schemes, because a lot of staff have problems of their own to deal with, and COVID could just be the final straw.
Yes, without that's financially, and thankfully we got some of the grants. So as I've been speaking to Peter, we've had a couple of people that have had to isolate due to not being able to get a COVID test. We won't go there, but we're able to financially support them in a way that we wouldn't have been able to before. So thank you for giving me that information. I shared it with my manager, and we're going to be doing that because, it's not their fault they can't get a test.
No, I mean, there are two, the infection control grant, the second round of that, should help you to be able to fund staff. And I know, because I heard Carolina Gerlich talking yesterday, that the Care Workers Charity have helped over 5,000 care workers who've been affected financially through isolation.
Yeah, because we had to take the stance. If you haven't got the COVID test and you've got symptoms, we have to treat you as if you've got it, just to make sure everyone's safe.
Yeah.
So there's another few questions in the chat. So firstly, it was a case, Leslie, does your sister have any underlying conditions? And another question is, has there been any financial support for your sister during this period?
So the answers to that is no. She was a little bit overweight, which we know doesn't help when you are fighting for your life in UCI with COVID. That's why they put her on her front. So the answer's no for that. She didn't have any underlying conditions prior to that, except for being a little bit overweight, which really isn't a condition. And financially, no. But luckily, because she gets paid to be the foster parent, while she was in hospital, the money was still coming in, so she had the money still coming through and she wasn't spending it. So that helped her because she had a little bit of money stacked away that was coming in weekly that she hadn't touched, that she could then pay off everything when she came out and wasn't in any financial hardship. And no, they haven't given her any special treatment as financially, no.
Okay. Any other points that people would like to raise with Leslie? And if there are any points that you'd like to talk about confidentially, then I'm speaking for Leslie. I would guess that Leslie would be happy to have a conversation with you. So
I'm more than happy, Peter, if anyone wants to contact me, for you to contact me, and at this group, I can have a chat with you. I feel as if I really needed a couple of months ago someone to be behind me and supporting me, and to be honest, except for my managing director, the help wasn't really there. So I want to just put myself on there that if anyone needs to have any support and are going through the same situation and wants to develop some coping mechanisms, which I had to do because I had to fight the battle coming back to work, going, I'm going to be looking after the elderly here who I'm going to do what I can do for my mum, because I ideally wanted my mum at home and I wanted to care for her, and that was taken away from me. So, anybody who needs any support, Peter, I'm quite happy for you to pass on my details and I'll contact them.
Thank you, Leslie. If there's nothing else on that, any points from you, Dudley, or shall we move on now?
We'll try and share. I know there are some forums and support groups as well. We'll try and share some links as well as Leslie's happy. We'll
and I've got some links on COVID, so I shall share them as well. So I've got lots of links on long COVID.
Okay, well, we'll put those together and then we'll circulate them. Many thanks. you may wonder why we've picked a subject that's perhaps very basic, like supervisions. One of the reasons for this is that many of the basic things are being forgotten. And over the many, many years of dealing with CQC, one subject that comes up time and again is poor supervisions. And it's not as if there isn't good information out there to use, you know, the likes of Skills for Care, Sky, etc. And it's not a difficult project, you know, to get right. But Mick from Citation, Mick Feather, who has a long history of training and also working as a CQC inspector, will go through this with you. And when I go into care businesses, care organisations, it's something that I see done very, very badly very often. With supervisions being done in corridors without any preparation, it's hopeless. And let's not start on appraisals because they're generally worse. But we will hand over to Mick so that he can do the piece on supervisions, and hopefully, Mick, I've got the right slides for you. I'll find those whilst you introduce yourself.
Well, perhaps it might be something more interesting, Pete, if you've got some other slides. That was great. Thank you very much, Leslie. And good morning, everybody. It's nice to talk to you, albeit the fact that I can't talk to you live and I've got to be in this box that we're in. So basically, as Pete gets the slides ready, so I'm the care business manager for Citation. So I used to be a CQC inspector, but don't hold that against me. I'm nice. So basically, I've turned kind of like gamekeeper turned poacher now. So I'm on the side of the righteous now. It actually seems, after your conversation, Leslie, it seems really unimportant me talking about supervisions, to be quite honest. I put it in the chat, but I sort of think that it's only stories like that. And stories that we've had, and recently Rosie and myself have been on some calls with other sort of associations where when you hear stories from kind of like care workers and managers and people that are experiencing some of this, you actually, you know, it actually gives you a bit of a sense of, you know, come on, we need, you know, it's not just about you. And I think that's really important from what you said, Leslie. So,
Yeah.
I mean, so my wife works in the NHS for an NHS trust. And one of the things that she's spent, I don't know, from March, it seems like March through to July, she seemed to spend her time trying to resolve and sort out issues regarding Black, Asian, minority, ethnic risk assessments, because the trusts weren't really looking at that as being vulnerable groups.
Yeah.
It wasn't, you know, even public health were a little bit kind of reluctant to go, oh, actually, we think possibly that BAME groups and other vulnerable, you know, people with underlying health conditions could be at risk. So it was actually up to trust sometimes to try and get that stuff in order and have those conversations with staff before kind of the government and public health actually got with it. So anyway, that all aside, I think it's really great, Leslie. It's obviously you've been through a dreadful time, but I think, you know, I think it only kind of like echoes the fact that it's not about individuals. It's about those other people that are next to us that could well, you know, be in a position like your sister, rather than thinking that, oh yeah, well, I'll be all right, you know, because I go down the gym 50 times a day. Well,
Yeah.
That's not going to help. So, but thank you very much for that. I'll try and talk about whatever. Oh, look, Pete has found supervisions. No, never mind. Right. Okay. If you want to click on the first slide, Pete, I think we've just got a picture of a couple of people and look, supervisions, nice. What I'm going to say, because I haven't got very much of a long spot, but I think what's important is to think about what's the most useful thing. And I kind of, certainly, I've been a trainer for some time. I used to train CQC inspectors as well at one point. I'm also a member of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, so I know a little bit of HR, but sometimes that sort of slips out for me. But in terms of obviously inspecting and sort of looking for where's sort of guidance for supervisions, without a doubt, that thing, which as Pete's already mentioned, is Skills for Care. You don't really need anything else. It'll be on these slides. If Pete shares these, at the end of the slides is kind of like the link. This little guidebook is an absolute gem. You don't even need to really look at anything else, to be fair. And I don't normally say that, because I normally say, oh, look at SGUI or look at something that CQC might have or whatever. Just look at that. is absolutely great in terms of sort of what I'm going to really quickly kind of like run you through. So we'll come back to that in terms of what it's got to offer and what it actually says. But I need to kind of probably give you a bit of a spin on my area of supervisions and why I think it's important. So if you flip to the next slide, we haven't got many, we've only got about 3 slides, but I'm trying to. So if we have a look there in terms of what I've put, because I think it's important to understand what it is. Pete's already mentioned appraisals. I mean, what's great in this sort of guidance from Skills for Care is that they actually have, you can print off a little sheet which actually tells you the difference between like appraisals and supervisions. And the key thing that I find with appraisal supervisions is that appraisals are usually, if they happen, I remember inspecting a dentist one point, and there was a manager there who actually said, "Oh, appraisals, we don't bother doing them because they're no use and they don't do anything." And you just sort of sit there and you think, right, okay. And it was actually in the policy saying we don't do any staff development here, and we don't do appraisals because they're meaningless. So, but when you talk to staff and say, well, what do you think about that? And they start saying, well, it'd be really good to know what I could be offered and what sort of courses. You start to think someone's made a decision on high about that, we're not going to do them. And it's probably a wrong decision. The thing for me about appraisals are kind of like an annual event. It's that, oh, I need to do an annual event. And appraisals is generally going to be about the fact of what's happened in the previous sort of 12 months. But the thing that's vital in terms of the difference between appraisals and supervisions is now. What's going on now? What are you doing now? Not in 12 months, in 6 months. What's happening now? And the reason why I kind of like get particularly interested about supervisions is when I read CQC reports, and obviously when I was an inspector as well, is the difference even between sort of care establishments, so care homes and dom care. So if I work in a dom care and I'm a manager, and all of you will know, I can see staff. I can see staff moving and handling. I can see staff dealing with meds. I can see staff and how they get on with service users, residents, etc. If it's dom care, and you may well not see that member of staff from one day to the next, and you tell me as an inspector that you don't do any form of supervision, alarm bells are ringing, everything's going off, because the problem is, what are you doing and how come you don't know what your staff are doing? And that really is a key thing for me. It's not forgivable in a care home, but in terms of sort of domiciliary care, it's a real issue if there is no level of what do I know staff are doing on a daily kind of weekly basis, because I need to know that, because I need to understand their performance and how things are going. So in terms of sort of terminology, first of all, before we start about the what, for me, supervisions, you can see it as kind of like being a, as it says there, regular contact with a manager, which is about monitoring and actually looking at what you're doing, reviewing what you're doing, whether you've got enough work, how that work is, how you're actually dealing with it, and whether there's any needs that you have in terms of training to actually help you do it. But in terms of terminology and language, some people, it's supervisions, I understand that. But even in dom care, there is potentially kind of like a whole raft of things that you could be doing. So spot checks. So, and there are sometimes different sort of, interpretations of what that is. So a spot check for me, and it might be different for others, is potentially as a manager, you're waiting outside someone's house to see whether that member of staff is dressed properly, got PPE, done all the things that they should be, and they arrive on time and they leave on time, etc., etc. That's a spot check, as opposed to potentially it being a field supervision. So I understand like a field supervision as being, I will be coming out with you to that individual's home and actually see what the rapport's like, see what's going on, and actually kind of like make a, an actual observation, as I would if I was in a care home, about what you're doing and how you're getting on. So for me, you could have spot checks, you can have field supervisions. The biggest thing and the biggest issue with all of this is about actually making sure you write it down. So many times I've either seen in reports, or you'll actually talk to kind of like managers and say, yeah, of course, yeah, I'm always talking to Dudley, yeah, every week, you know, we're always talking about how things are going, blah, blah, blah. If it's not written down, that's just make-believe to a CQC inspector. You're just telling me, oh yeah, you do have super, you don't really, do you? And even if the member of staff says, oh yeah, I'm always talking to, you know, my manager about what's going on, if it's not written down, you have not got any record of the fact that that supervision's taking place. So if we talk about, we've got away from that, you know, appraisals annually, supervisions, it's entirely up to you in terms of sort of frequency. I've actually put down, there's some nice guidance which actually mentions, and nice guidance is at the back of these slides as well, but it actually says that potentially it could be kind of like every 3 months would be a recommended kind of but it's entirely up to you. You know, if it's induction, I mean, I would certainly think that if you've got a 3-month or a 6-month induction, they're probably going to be wanting to, you know, look at every month you're going to be doing a supervision. So if we look at some of what it is, we've done sort of what it is and what it should be. So in terms of kind of like keeping a bit of a record about what's going on, whether there's any priorities, any training, development. If you want to know a real reason why you should, you know, just if it's just the fact of, well, why should I be doing it? If you look at effective key line of inquiry, effective 2, it actually says, how does the service make sure that staff have the skills, knowledge and experience to deliver effective care and support? And 2.3 specifically says, in effective, do staff and any volunteers have effective and regular mentorship, support, induction, supervision, appraisal and training? That's not me making that up. Those are the lines from basically the key lines of inquiry that CQC inspector would look at. There is also another one, because this comes under Regulation 18, which will be at the back of, again, the actual link will be at the back of these slides, because that's where it actually specifically kind of states whereabouts you'll find that in kind of like regulation. And it's Regulation 18 regarding staffing, and it will actually specifically actually tell you and talk to you about the actual specifics that are required in order for you to kind of make sure you meet the fundamental standards. So, supervisions, also including quality assurance. What are you talking about, Mick, when you talk about quality assurance in terms of, you know, what that is? So when we talk about supervisions, we think it's about effective. We don't necessarily kind of like think, is it in any other area? Well, yes, it is in other areas. The minute you think about supervisions, the minute you're not doing them, it then becomes an actual safety issue. So what I mean by that is, as an inspector, if I see that you are not doing supervisions, that means there's a safety angle in the respect that I cannot see that you're getting a grip of whether staff have got the right skills, right ability to actually provide the best care. And if you're not doing that, that immediately flags up as safety as an issue. Once you start having safety as an issue, that then leaps into well-led, because that means as a manager, you are not basically either dealing with the actual paperwork side of doing a supervision, or understanding that you need to know that your staff know what they're doing, which therefore means it becomes a leadership management issue. So it's not, you know, there are certain things, I'm being really facetious here, you know, I could talk about boiler checks or something uninteresting, like, you know, fire extinguisher checks. And of course it's a safety issue. Of course it's relevant. And of course those things need tested and they need to be checked and whatever. But in the scheme of things, something like supervisions will be really high up there, because that has a direct impact on individuals kind of like in your care, because it basically means that why don't you know what staff are doing and how well they're doing it? So I think I've done the what. If you want to skip it on one, Pete, we'll have a look at why. I think we've done a lot of these already, to be quite honest. So I mentioned Regulation 18, and I will kind of like just specifically tell you why, what's it got to do with Regulation 18 staffing for CQC. So basically they put persons employed by the service provider in the provision of a regulated activity must, so it says must, receive such appropriate support, comma, training, comma, professional development, comma, supervision and appraisal as is necessary to enable them to carry out the duties they are employed to perform. So it's not just Pete saying it, it's not just me saying it. That's directly from regulation and for CQC. So for no other reason, if you didn't know why you needed to do it, that would be an almost obvious one. There are loads of other ones. Let's have a look. Opportunity for staff managers to spend time talking. Pete's just mentioned about the fact of, you know, a supervision is not a quick chat in the corridor. What's brilliant about this guide, because we'll come on to it in a minute, kind of like the real issue, which is about, you know, how you do it. But in this guide, there are some great things. There's a little page on, you know, don'ts. And it just says, you know, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. Because some of the things really that I've just highlighted are about the fact of making sure that, you know, it's not just something which you think of as an afterthought. You need to almost have these things planned in. The reasons for doing it is it's about maintaining quality of care. How do you know what your staff are doing and how well do you know that they're doing it if you're not doing these? Because you're setting standards and you're actually making sure they're living the values of your organisation. Making sure that staff feel supported. I mean, you know, Leslie's mentioned it in terms of, you know, her great kind of discussion this morning, but, you know, I'm one of these people that sometimes, you know, I live off feedback. You know, I live off feedback in terms of, you know, are you doing all right? Are you not doing all right? Or are you doing crap? Or, you know, you need to do better or whatever it is. I can't stand it. I can't stand sometimes, you know, the sort of era that we're in at the moment or the time that we're in where, you know, I haven't seen a manager or, you know, I've only seen my manager virtually. There's no kind of like pat on the back unless it's an email. And you don't get that sense of, oh, look, you're doing a really good job. And I think all of us, even as human beings, love the idea of, look, this is really good. And the next bit that we will come on to in a little bit, but the how, it's around that. It's around how do you have conversations which are trying to get the best out of people in a coaching kind of way without, you know, the issues really for me about supervision, you wouldn't want it to be something where you're just going to moan. So, you know, Dudley, you haven't done that again. You haven't done that. You haven't done that. And you haven't done that. Pull your socks up and do it. It's a conversation about, look, what's going on that you're doing really well. Then talk about potentially things that, you know, you may need to kind of like, you know, improve and the reasons for it. Why have you, you know, why do they need to be improved? What is the actual specifics? And then what you can do to do it. There's no point going into conversations if you don't know what can be done. So there's no point saying, oh yeah, we'd really love to, Leslie, really help you with this and whatever. Trouble is we've got no courses, we don't know what to do and there's nowhere we can go. So you can't do anything about it. So we'll have this same conversation in a couple of months' time and I'll still tell you that you can't do it and you can't do anything about it because that's just pointless. It says ensuring staff feel supported, really important in terms of communication between staff and managers. What's going wrong, what's not? You know, it's a CQC, you know, requirement about, you know, can staff actually challenge practice? What is the conversation? As managers, you will want to know what's going on and what's not going on well, because that's about quality assurance. So what better way than having a conversation about, actually, Mick, let's have a supervision. Well, you know what? It's really rubbish here. And why is it rubbish? Well, we're doing this and we're not doing that and we should be doing this. That's valuable information. So it says allow staff to have a conversation about what's going well, what's not. Celebrate achievements. I've just mentioned that. Really important, and particularly at this time. You know, people are going through really challenging stuff. You guys are amazingly just carrying on and dealing with the stuff you've got to deal with. That is something that really is, you know, real sort of strength to your elbow in terms of the fact to be able to carry on and do that. And it's about not just celebrating the achievements, but also trying to find solutions to any issues. What are the things that you could practically kind of do? How can you actually kind of like, what are the opportunities in terms of development? So what things are on offer? What's actually available? If you don't know what that is, then that's an issue. So before you think about sort of, well, what are the attributes of someone who can do a good supervision? It's about what things do I need to know about what could be the problem. So if Peter, for example, you know, lacks compassion or is a bit of an issue in terms of confidentiality, then what could I put in place to actually try and improve that? And those things are just about the fact of whether it's training courses, you know, what things I can do. Blah, 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 blah. Nice. Final slide, I think it is, Pete, before we do some questions. So here's the most complicated bit, and here's the really difficult bit. And we can't do this in sort of 5 minutes. What I would say, We'll look at this very handy guide from Skills for Care, which is brilliant. Why is it brilliant? Not only does it talk about, you know, who can carry out supervisions, what are the attributes of a good supervisor, you know, care, compassion, competence, communication, whatever. It gives you all those things that you probably already have. But it's great because it's also got example templates about what you want to ask. I mean, I would say that as a manager, you probably know what sort of things are key. Some of these are quite long-winded. You know, they're talking about, have they got the right values? Is the person a role model to others? Do they understand the regulatory requirements? Do they remain calm under pressure? I mean, a lot of those things you could probably bundle up into something else, but you know what you need to ask, which are crucial sort of things. You know, at the moment, do staff feel safe when they're kind of like, you know, dealing with residents, dealing with clients? You know, do they feel they've got enough PPE? Do they kind of like feel that they've got good rapport with kind of like those clients and whatever? What could be improved? What are the things that are on my mind right now? Is it about pay? Is it about, you know, redundancy? What are the issues? And I think fundamentally, you can create a supervision to not only be beneficial in terms of what it's for the supervisee, but also for you in terms of gaining information which can help you and help your business. Because as I say, these templates are great, and it's also got a record. And this is really important. Doesn't matter what you do, what template you use, you need to keep a record of it. Even if it's kind of written on a, you know, scrap bits of paper saying, met with Peter, we spoke about this was the issue, we're going to deal with it, he's going to do a little training course or whatever it is, to keep a record that it's been done. Because if it's not written down, didn't happen. We've already done that one. So make time for people. So it's not just a quick conversation in the corridor, it's about an actual consideration about, we are going to have a supervision, it will be on this date, and we're going to have time talking about it. Communicate to staff what they are and what they're not, and basically what's going to happen as a result. Be open and transparent about it, listen. I mean, it sounds obvious, but, you know, I have had managers in my lifetime where listening is not a thing. So supervision is me as a manager telling you what you need to do, and then at the end you can say thank you, and then I'll go. That isn't a supervision. A supervision is about a two-way conversation about what's going on and how I'm doing, not about, oh, isn't that great? You'll now just give me a list of other things that I've got on top of the list I've already got. Identify what you need to know to improve the individual, team, and organisation. So that, you know, for me, that's kind of like making sure that it works as a team, because that's not just as an individual, it's about how they contribute to the actual organisation's performance. And that's a really important thing. You know, we know that development is not great sometimes in terms of care, but as soon as you start saying to people, it's really great that you're doing this, and you can do some development, and we can improve that, and, you know, there are considerations about you being a champion for this, being a champion for infection control or whatever it is, that gives people responsibility and accountability, that they have a sense of responsibility and accountability, which is really good, particularly kind of like when you want to feel valued, and sometimes if you're not getting feedback and whatever. Balance the strong and weak areas when you're having conversations. We've already done that. Demonstrate genuine support. So, you know, I think, you know, we've already heard this morning about the fact of, you know, potentially kind of people, how they're feeling. That's really important at this time. Support in terms of, you know, whether it's people, you know, who may have been bereaved, whether it's about the fact of feeling stressed, mental health issues, what support can you provide? And just be realistic about that. You know, you're not, you know, you may be able to sort of offer some support, but be aware of what that might look like. And last thing I've put there is understand what further training development can be offered. And that's really you understanding what is available and what can be done. Because there are some things, you know, if I said at my supervision, I really want to improve my rapport with service users, then potentially you could give me a whole list of things. If I came to you and said, I want to find a cure for dementia, that's probably out of my grasp and out of your grasp to help me to do it. So it's about being practical about potentially what you can and can't achieve, because I think sometimes you have to make sure that that's manageable. And of course, budgets will come into some of that, you know. I don't know, in order to help my mental health and people in kind of like the care home or whatever, I'd like to create a, you know, herbal, you know, garden with plants and, you know, whatever. I mean, that again is, you know, great thing, wonderful, but it's about whether that's achievable and whether that's sort of manageable in terms of finances at the moment. I think I'm done now. I think the next slide is just those references, Pete, which is just the ones that I mentioned. So skills for care, that's really where you need to go. Nice guidelines will give you and tell you what you need to do and why you need to do it. Care Quality Commission, that's the actual regulations in terms of why you should be doing it. And the next slide should say questions. Oh, but before it does, Rosie Figgis, do you want to say about what Citation do?
Hello, thank you so much, Mick. Really, really helpful. Just a very, very quick word for me just to touch on who Citation are and what we do. I know we've spoken with many of you in the past, but if we haven't, hello. So essentially, when it comes to your care service, you can almost think of Citation as a sort of one-stop shop for everything HR, employment law, health and safety. And as mentioned, throughout, we have lots of experience in the care industry, so we do understand how important it is and how we can support you in the very specific pressures that you find yourself facing. So whilst we may be a one-stop shop, we're not a one-size-fits-all solution, and that's really because of the level of expertise our team has in the care industry specifically. So by having our health and safety and HR support from the 24-hour advice line, documents, contracts, handbooks, just getting, as Peter mentioned earlier, getting those basics, don't forget those basics, and getting those kind of core foundations in place. It's obviously been a very difficult year, and particularly in the care industry. So we need to remember to make sure those basics are in place as well. As well as our core HR, employment law and health and safety support services, we have a suite of care-specific products as well, from CQC Pro, which is our digital platform to help organise inspections, care-specific policies, procedures, policy and procedure templates, mock inspections, which is always really useful, and of course our employee assistance program, which I think fits in quite nicely with today in terms of getting that support to your staff in these difficult times, and also e-learning, which is something we know is being utilised a lot more than ever before due to the current circumstances. So our whole range of products is really here to support you with compliance. And if you could go on to the last slide. So this is the slide I added in earlier and sent to Pete, well, didn't send to Peter and then sent to Peter, and I'd like to apologise because I put the wrong time. So it's actually 1:30, so that was an error on my part. So it's 1:30 on Wednesday next week. So Wednesday afternoon at 1:30. Again, you know, looking at making sure we got the focusing on the day-to-day issues as well and getting the basics right. So we're running that 1:30 on Wednesday. Mick will be talking there as well, and the whole theme of
That's put everybody off already.
The whole theme of the webinar is getting inspection ready. So we're looking from an angle, obviously, of course, in terms of CQC. As inspection activities begin to resume, it's important to make sure that the ground work is there to make sure you are inspection ready. Mick talks about, and I won't steal your thunder too much, Mick, but being virtually inspectable, which we know is something key that we're going to have to be thinking about in the coming months. What Mick has done is analysed 50 CQC reports and identified some real key areas of themes and issues that commonly cause providers to fall down and deteriorate to requires improvement. So it's a really good session just to kind of think about some of those things, risk assessments, like supervisions, appraisals, making sure leadership is running well to kind of keep you in line in terms of your CQC inspections. Flora, our national presenter and business owner herself, actually then goes on to speak about discussing your legal duties as a provider, including COVID responsibilities and HR and health and safety best practice. So some real key things in there to hopefully help you next week. I'll pop the link in the, Peter has sent and will be sending further information out, but I'll pop the link in the chat box now so you can register. Oh, Peter's in it already.
Oh, sorry, wouldn't want to be efficient, but
thank you. And then the last slide is questions. So if you've got any questions about citation or anything specifically for Mick in terms of supervisions, please go for it now. Thank you very much.
If I can just add what we've introduced, because we recognise the fact that supervisions were difficult to do face-to-face when we were in the midst of the pandemic, and we've carried it on like this. So what we've introduced is a telephone supervision. All of my staff have a supervision 10 to 12 weeks. So while COVID was in the midst in the first wave, we were doing them by telephone, and I was just evidencing on the top of the supervision that it was done by telephone due to COVID-19. So we was able to keep up with my carers, understanding their needs and any extra support that they needed. What we also introduced was a weekly wellbeing. So it wasn't a supervision, it was just a format of 4 questions asking, you know, do they understand the protocol of COVID-19? Are they following the guidelines? Do they need any support with PPE? Are they running out of anything? Is there anything from a management team perspective that we could do to help you out because of something that could be affecting your working life? So something in her personal life could have happened. If they wanted to share it with us, they did. If they shared it with us, we could give them some support and some links and some websites to follow. So that's how right at home we kept on top of doing the supervisions and the welfare checks whilst we was in the height of the pandemic. So, you know, that's the way I communicated with all the staff on a weekly basis. So I did ask them, did they need any further support? And the answer would be no. And as the pandemic was going through, it got to the point where they said to me, please stop phoning me weekly, I'm okay. So then we went on to 2 weekly, but we're going back up again now to weekly, especially my particularly vulnerable caregivers that I've got working for us. I would just target them. The ones that are strong and can do it and don't want me to call them, I would just touch base with them intermittently. And in supervisions, it's active listening to what the feedback they're giving you, because you can use that to make your service a stronger, better service. When I first took over as register manager, when I used to phone people up and get them booked in for supervision, their first instance is, what have I done wrong? So that just tells you what the supervisions were being used to previous to me taking over. And I would explain to them, it's not about what you've not done, it's what you have done and what we can achieve to make you better. We've also introduced, my manager wrote a thank you card to all of the caregivers, handwritten cards sent in the post. Thank you for all your hard work during the pandemic. You know, you're amazing. Thank you from all of us at Right at Home, which personally coming from her, I thank them every day, you know, I think made a difference. Also, little things like we've got tiny little pins that go on our lanyards, and they are for being gems, going the extra mile, because all of the care staff go the extra mile every day in every way, otherwise we wouldn't have a business. They're amazing and they need to be shown it. Just this little pin costs about 50p, and recognition of, you know, all the years, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years pins. They cost 50p each. Giving someone something like that, something so little, my whole office staff are fighting over them at the moment because they want them. But it just shows you how something little that costs 50p, or writing that letter that costs 50p with stamp, makes a real difference. And it's something that everyone can do, and it's not going to, you know, cost a lot of money. So that was my, you know, just feedback on the way we do supervisions.
Mick, I'm not sure if there's any questions out there in the group. I think someone had asked in regards to the length of time a supervision should take, and compared also to that to an appraisal. So if you could come in, Mick.
Again, I think it depends. It's a little bit like Leslie just mentioned, really. It depends what does your supervision, or what your supervision questions in terms of what you want to know and what you actually want to get out of it. So if you're doing a supervision every month, then basically that would probably be less questions and less time than if you're doing one every 3 months. my personal opinion is that I don't think there's any conversation which is sort of worthwhile if it's not at least 30 minutes or more. So I can't believe that you can do a reasonable supervision, whether it's after a month or 3 months, that's less than 45 minutes. But again, it depends what you want. You'd almost prefer, like Leslie said, I'd prefer to have a weekly 10-minute chat with you than have 45 minutes every 3 months. But you need to write it down. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, it didn't happen. And the only one that anyone knows about is the one every 3 months. Yeah. So for me, it's not sometimes even the duration. It's about what both parties are getting out of it. As Leslie said, it's a mutual thing. So it's about managers getting something from it, but also it's more importantly, it's about individuals. What can be done to actually sort of help them? So no real time limit. It depends what questions you're asking and what information you want to know, really.
Yeah. And a point I'd make about supervisions is that it's about effective communications within an organization. And if you look at an organization with effective communication, it tends to have good culture. So you've got an open and transparent means of communication, which keeps CQC happy. It also retains staff. It has good impact on staff morale and staff retention. Every time you recruit a new carer, that's probably costing you $3,000. And if you can save $3,000 a month, what's not to like?
Yeah.
There was a situation, sorry to chip in there. There was a situation where a provider felt they didn't have, let's just say like loosely, the respect of their staff, and they got an outsider in to actually do the supervisions. What would be your opinion on that, Mick?
Okay, do you want like a corporate answer, or do you want like I mean my personal opinion is that I think that it's a bit of an issue if you've got an outside company having to do your supervisions. Don't get me wrong, I know I work for Citation. So if you're talking about outsourcing your HR, outsourcing your health and safety, well, of course you can. And of course, it's because potentially you may not be experts in HR and health and safety, you're experts in care. However, if it's about a supervision, so it's about you managing staff, I would worry about that manager's ability to manage staff if there's a failure of gaining respect where you need to have, for me, that would be a communication no. So alarm bells will be ringing and I'll be thinking, why are you needing to get someone from outside to actually find out what's happening in your organization? Because it will bite you in the backside, because fundamentally, as an inspector, if you talk to staff about things and you find out things that the manager doesn't know, those will be the things, not me, because I was nice, but what inspectors will do is that they will bang hard on those things and they'll say, Dudley, why do you not know that the issues that staff have is this, this, and this? And then when it's found out that you don't even do the supervisions, it will be, well, what is going on? Who's managing what? So that's my,
I've got exactly that situation at the moment because I'm doing some work for a company, and it's a nice little company and they do a good job, but I am finding from some of the staff things that the manager ought to be telling me. And I'm telling the manager, he's going, what? How do you find that out? Who told you that? And I'm thinking, you're working here every day. It's been your business for 10 years. And I've just come trotting along and done a few hours on Zoom and whatever. And I'm picking up stuff because as a manager, your experience, you should be able to spot stuff without being told. And that's part of your preparation for supervisions.
Yeah.
Anything else for Mick, or we'll move on to Skills for Care with Laura?
I know before we go, I know Anthony did mention about appraisals, and I think it might be something for another day, Mick. We might have to call you back in.
Okay.
Give more of a...
Anthony, hang on, what does that say? All information, everything explained very well. Would it possible? Okay, right. Yes, certainly could be.
Yeah.
Some other time, yes.
Yeah, and I think probably good to give probably an example. We have to probably get Mick probably interviewing Peter or something, and people can have a look how it's done. So something for the future for us to be mesmerised about.
We could probably do how it should not be done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a bleep button?
Oh, and there was another question in there very quickly about what's your take on supervision for managers by a provider and staff who are registered nurses? What's the exact sort of requirement or recommendation for clinical supervision?
It does actually mention it actually in the effective supervisions guide and skills for care. So it does actually say who can be, and it did actually mention registered nurses. But you're talking about something which is quite different. You're talking about clinical supervisions probably likely to be in hospitals. I mean, basically, it is likely that whatever, because it sounds to me, because if it's a clinical supervision, it is likely that it's actually going to be hospital. If it is, then that trust is likely to have their own set. This is what everybody has in terms of clinical supervision. So in terms of what is your take on so supervision for managers by provider, again, that's a difficult one because, you know, you'll have some sort of providers who are quite hands-on and who'll be very competent about being able to do that. There'll be some that will be absolutely appalling and probably need to talk, you know, have the same discussion that we've had. So there'll be some providers that are absolutely just nightmares about, do you know what I mean? For them, it would be almost like, oh, we seem to be doing well. You've got a good rating. Thanks very much. See you next year. That would be their take on it. My personal opinion really would be that, I don't know. I think you will have providers that are really good. I think you'll have providers where basically the managers probably need to try and get them to actually have some sort of training or some sort of ability to be able to do a decent job of supervision. And as I say, in regard to clinical supervision, that is likely to be hospitals and that is likely to be potentially something that the trust actually says this is what you have to do in terms of clinical supervision. It's probably, you know, not something that happens quite a lot in kind of like, you know, care homes in terms of clinical supervisions. I wouldn't have thought, unless you're talking about nursing homes where the registered managers are actually doing supervisions of specific things like infection control and meds. But yeah, that is a really good one actually, because I can see a lot of you managers, depending on what your providers are like, about getting absolutely appalling supervisions, wouldn't you? Do you know what I mean? Where they don't even know what it is. So it's almost like, oh, well, you're doing all right. Thanks. See ya. I think potentially it would be a good thing to actually introduce kind of like skills for care in terms of, look, there's a simple kind of template. Here it is. Let's use it and actually get your manager to actually promote that to the provider to say, look, let's use this. Because at least you've got some sort of basis rather than a provider thinking, I don't know what I've got to do for these. I think I'll just tell you you're doing all right or just give you a whack if you're not doing very well. Do you know what I mean? So I sort of think, you know, you will get providers that are really good, see how good it is, and you'll get some that you may not be that happy about doing supervisions. I don't know whether that answers the question, but that's the best you got.
Okay. I might be able to find an answer out from somebody else actually about the nurses, but I know I couldn't possibly comment, of course, but some nurses can be very difficult to deal with, right or wrong.
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose for me, a lot of that will be about the fact of what's trying to be achieved. So if it's a nursing home where you've got a a registered nurse who's actually really het up on infection control or meds, well, the registered manager can talk to them and do their supervision. Why do you have to get the registered nurse to do it?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Okay, right. I think we're going to have to cut because Laura's going to have to go, so she needs to whiz through her slides quite quickly.
I think she's probably been very buoyed by Mick's really doing part of her job.
I don't get any commission from Skills for Care, by the way.
I was about to say, it's like been paying you, isn't it? Great marketing there. Thank you.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's Mick's done half your work for you, Laura, anyway. What of it? But,
yeah, he's leaving now. That's fine.
Okay. I mean, the slides, just to say, the slides will be coming around very shortly anyway, so.
Great, thanks, Peter. Just a few things to update you all on today, as it wasn't long since the last meeting. If you go on to the next slide, please. The first thing is the networks we've been setting up around the country for deputy managers. So the registered managers we've had in place for a few years now, such as this one, managers have fed back they've been really, really helpful, really supportive, particularly during this pandemic. So because of this, we thought we should also set up networks for deputy managers as well, just to give them the same access to peer support, kind of learning, the opportunity to discuss any issues or challenges, things like that. It's been agreed we can have a deputy manager network for London. And the first meeting is going to be on the 24th of November, 10 o'clock, and this is going to be held via Zoom. And this first meeting will be more of an introductory one, just to let people know about the purpose of the network, have a bit of a chat about what they may want to get out of it. And then the idea is to run a series of theme networks. So we're going to look at topics like wellbeing and resilience, communications, personal effectiveness, and whatever attendees tell us they'd find useful. And there's going to be an element of networking as well, and we hope that deputy managers can buddy up with each other. So all the meetings will of course be held virtually at the moment, but the idea is that eventually, I'm not sure when, but they will be held face to face. So if you do think your deputy would be interested in joining, you can find out more and book places via the link on the slides, and I'll put the link into the chat afterwards. But it's open to deputy managers from any type of service, at residential, domiciliary, supported living, and it should hopefully provide a useful development opportunity for people, as well as just another way for deputy managers to access support. So yeah, do have a look, and I'll put the link in the chat in a moment. So if we can move on to the next one, Peter. So we're doing a webinar on medication, and over the past few years, some of you may know, we've been regularly running medication workshops alongside CQC and NICE, usually our London office, and some of you may have attended these in the past. And we're going to be running another one in November, and of course again it's going to be via Zoom, but this will focus on medication during and beyond COVID-19, and it's relevant to all different types of settings: domiciliary, residential, supported living. We've got the CQC and NICE joining us again. So the CQC speaker is going to be focusing on what good medication management looks like within the context of regulation and inspection, particularly during COVID. And NICE will be giving an overview of the support that they can provide to care organisations, and just giving some examples of good practice when managing medicines in the community and in residential settings. Again, you can book by the link on the slide. I'll put that in the chat in a moment. And when you register, you should get asked if there are any questions or any issues you want to address during the webinar, so we can let the speakers know beforehand what topics to kind of focus on. It's on the 18th of November, I think in the morning. And if you can't attend, we will be recording it, so we can send you the link round afterwards. I've seen a note from Peter, it's the same date as our next network. So yeah, you can access the recording. We'll make sure you get a copy of that if it'd be useful. Okay, next one, please, Peter. So sector-based work academy programmes, I spoke about these at the previous meeting, so I won't spend too long on them. But just to say, these are a way of kind of accessing that pool of people on Job Centre Plus's books at the moment who have lost their jobs in retail, hospitality, and actually progressing them into permanent employment in care. There's lots of people who are interested in care but don't have any experience, any knowledge of the sector. So these programmes would put them on a 2-week course, Step Into Care, which covers the knowledge elements of the care certificate. They'd then complete a short work experience placement to find out a bit more about the realities of working in care. We then have a pool of people available for local employers such as yourselves to interview. So it's a very kind of low cost way of recruiting new staff. And we've got a swap running at the moment, or shortly to launch, for Croydon, Sutton and Merton. There's one running for Kingston, and in the next couple of weeks we're also going to be launching one for Richmond and Wandsworth. So if you do need new staff and want to get involved, just drop me an email and I'll let you know how you can get on board. And the last one, please, Peter. Learning from events. This is a new digital e-learning module we've developed for managers to support them to run learning reviews. And by learning reviews, we mean when you bring people together to explore an incident and look at what actions you may need to put in place to stop something similar happening in the future. So if you've read the social care winter plan, you'll have seen that learning reviews are actually mentioned in this. It talks about undertaking learning reviews after any COVID outbreaks, and also managers allowing staff to complete online learning around learning reviews, so they're better equipped to take part in these. So this module is free to access, and it looks at what learning reviews are and why they're needed, how the wider team can be involved, and how they can be embedded within your organisation. So you can find out more by going to the link. It's about 35 minutes to complete, and at the end you're signposted to further reading. So as I've said, it's free to access, but you can actually still claim back £100 per person who's completed it from Skills for Care's workforce development funding. And this is meant to cover employee time in actually doing the module, and also employee time in then embedding that learning afterwards. So I've spoken about workforce development funding quite a few times, so you're probably aware of it already. But if you do want to undertake this module, want to claim some money back, just drop me an email and I'll let you know how you can do that. Okay, sorry, it's a really quick run through. I haven't got time for questions, I'm going to have to dash, but please do email me or give me a call. My contact details are at the top of the slide there, and I'll put the links into the chat now. And yeah, hopefully see you all soon.
I'd like to add in, just before Laura's getting ready to go, Peter does update the news and these events on the website, and I also try and post things on WhatsApp of when they're happening, so you can sign in and click the link as well. So we do try and update you as much as possible. There's so many courses going on, and we're all trying to fit around them. So just look for the website and on WhatsApp when courses are coming up.
Okay. Many thanks, Laura. Sorry that we got the timing slightly out, but
don't you have to rush off. It's just one of those days, back to back.
Yeah. I've just stuck a note in the chat about the meeting on the 18th. On the 18th of November in the morning, when we have the next meeting, we've got Alison Murray, who's in that sense not just a CQC inspector. She is the London lead for CQC, and she's also the IPC lead for CQC as well. So that should be very interesting and very useful. And if there are any points that you want raised, as a part of that meeting, then either turn up at the meeting or let us know in advance if anything that you think might be useful, then, or that you don't want to talk about in an open meeting, then let Dudley or I know, and we will pass it on to Alison, and make sure that we get an answer for you.
So Peter did mention IPC, so I think there's a lot of questions about IPC, which is fairly important. So please prepare a question or any sort of issues you may have around that. No matter how complicated they are, I think it's a good time to pose that question to CQC. Yeah,
I mean, I think IPC is obviously a huge subject at the moment. The second round of the grants are out, so you should be hearing from your local authority. If you haven't, then I suggest you chase them up. And I know that some local authorities are still, or some providers are still waiting to hear about the first round of the infection control grant. So you may need to sort of chase that up and try and access that funding, because it's there in that sense, and the Department of Health do want it spent. Before we wrap up, a few things. We're obviously trying to cover as much as possible on the news page of the website, and a lot of that information goes on to WhatsApp. As of the end of this month or the start of November, if you buy PPE, you're going to have to pay VAT on it. If you get PPE through the portal, it will be coming to you costed, at no cost anyway. There have been problems with the portal, but they are being resolved bit by bit. It was deleting orders, but if you're not getting stuff, then just keep trying. Training is absolutely vital. It's one of those basic things. Don't ignore it. Keep on top of it. With CQC inspections, the new virtual inspections, you need to be showing that you're proactive regarding IPC, infection control, and the link of that to business continuity policies and how you are managing your staff and looking after their health and well-being. And they're expecting you to be proactive, not reacting to what happens.
On top of that, Peter, add in the HSC spot inspections as well, that happening as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've posted some stuff about that. We won't mention test and trace. Flu jabs, get your flu jabs. They are coming back bit by bit. Some organisations are now taking bookings. It is important. Dudley will come back to you with more information around the workforce race equality standard. There's some moves taking place there with local authorities. We're trying to keep on top of that for you. Visiting, there's one or two protocols floating about. If anybody wants a protocol, then let me know, because I've got one from, I think it's Berkshire, and they're happy to allow that to be circulated, so let me know. The pay level for immigration has been lowered. They've quietly lowered it, and there are moves to get social care employees added to the essential worker list. That hasn't yet happened. I'm still getting queries about insurance. If you've got problems with insurance, then basically please contact Richard Barnes at Towergate. His details are on the website, but if you can't find them, let me know, we'll sort it out. And we've had a couple of suggestions during this meeting about subjects for next meetings. Tell us what you want and we can sort it out for you, or we can try and sort it out for you.
We also are trying to get a clinical advisor to come on board as well, hopefully. So you may be able to pose a few other questions on top of it as well. So do watch out for that coming soon. But definitely, as Peter said, if you get any suggestions to us, we can try and arrange speakers ahead of time, and they can answer sort of questions or queries that you guys have. And we can get good speakers in, people like Mick and so forth, who can come in and really give you sort of guidance as well.
Yeah. Do keep comments coming, and many thanks to those, to Leslie who's now gone, to Mick and to Rosie, and what today has exampled in a very good way is the huge amount of information that you have between you, and will be really useful for you to share. And that's the strength of a network.
Indeed, that really is really important what Peter's saying. We all can try and help each other, sharing good templates, good practices. Peter shares a lot of things on the website where possible. So where you can and you feel it's good, or you've passed on something, or even as Leslie suggested with supervisions, simple things such as pendants or whatever thing you feel is helpful to staff, it's really good to share the story.
Yeah, and you should be able to getting your free care badges now as well. Not quite sure why it took the Department of Health so long to get their finger out and get those organised, but they've done it. So, get onto them. And back to the grants, the infection control grants. Don't think you need to beg for that. It's an entitlement, basically. So, to get it.
Okay. And is there anything else that anyone would like to mention or comment on before we go, everyone?
Okay. It seems like several people have wanting a copy of the visiting protocol. So I've got a couple of emails and I will send those, but I will also make sure that I bung it on the website. There is an occasion where things on the website can get buried. You might just have to scroll down a bit to actually find things, but there is a huge amount of stuff there. And
I also try and see if someone wants it. I can actually add it to WhatsApp, and you might be able to access it as well from that as well. So we'll try our best.
Right. We will indeed. Okay. Any other points before we close?
There was a question that I'm not sure if anyone has been offered to participate in trials using anti-malarial sort of drugs, I think, to prevent COVID-19. I'm not sure if anyone's been approached to go on any trials at all, COVID-19 trials amongst you. That was just a quick question that someone had asked.
Right, Corinne. Okay.
Okay. No problem. Well, I think we've got the answer there. But look, thanks for everyone for joining. We'll do our best to keep you updated, and follow us on the website and in WhatsApp. We will really try and continue all the changes that are sort of happening rapidly. Thank you.
You look forward to seeing you on the 18th, and a good turnout for CQC. Many thanks. Thanks, Owen. All the best. Bye now. Bye, 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 bye. How do I get out of here?